Economist here. So, oh shoot, I hope I left the speech down in the description. I'm sorry. If I didn't leave the speech down in the description before I got started, I got this kind of hurried out there a little bit. What we are going to be reviewing is San Francisco uh, President Daly in her speech given Wednesday, March 6th. 2024, and this is a very, very interesting speech. And like I said, if I failed to leave the link down in the description, the remarks at the National Interagency Community Reinvestment Conference. And so anyway, if you probably just Google Daly's Wednesday, March 6, 2024 speech, it should pop right up. Very interesting, some of the things she has to say inside of this speech when it comes to talking about the future of housing, inflation, and what we can expect going into the future. Because you have to think, like, housing isn't something that's going to snap around inside of a few weeks or even months. Housing is something that is years, even takes on decades worth of, like, transitioning from being, a hot market to a slow market, buyer, seller, the crashes and booms that have come from it. We have experienced some major shifts going on within the housing market. And again, this speech is really telling. I mean, she admits right in it that, let me see if I could find, there's a chart up here on it. Let's see, like the home value to median family income has more than doubled. It was somewhere around, I don't know, little over 1.5 years worth of income, like just shy of 2 years worth of income to buy a house. And now it's over 3 years worth of average income to buy a house, to buy the median house. And so, like, even there, if you just look at it from the 60s to now, the ability for like the average income to get into a house has diminished rapidly. And if you go and you look at the chart itself, like, I don't know, I can spin it around. I don't know if you can really see it through there, but you can see there's like an exponential rise happening right now within the requirements of what it takes, or the average income to buy a house, and how long that actually takes, how many years it takes. Anyway, we got quite a few people up in here. Let's go ahead and start this. I'm going to play the speech. There's actually a video of it, so I'm just going to let Daly use her own words here, and we're going to kind of break this down. I'm not going to go over the whole thing because it's like, fairly long. I'm just going to go review just a section of it that I think is really important to try and internalize and think about, because again, this is like the Federal Reserve's opinion of what it is that needs to take place going into the future. It's not the entire Federal Reserve view. It's just one individual, the president of the San Francisco Fed, but it's an important position to hold. And so anyway, let's just hear what she has to say here, and then we'll start reviewing it.
Have found it to be true. But it was brought home to me very distinctly in a visit I made to Orange County, California. I was meeting with a group of local restaurant owners, and we were talking about the challenges of finding and keeping workers. And when I asked about the role of housing, the room changed. Physically, you could feel it. Everyone had stories of loss, real loss. Loss of long-time employees who couldn't find and couldn't afford the ever-increasing commuting distances. They had to move further and further away, and they just couldn't make ends meet doing it, so they left. The loss of interested applicants.
Now, I'm going to continue. She talks a little bit more about this, but I just wanted to bring up, like, this is the same story we are hearing in a lot of communities. I mean, I follow the lumber industry. That's pretty much like the one industry that I am just like kind of focused in on. But over in Montana, a mill over there was like, hey, we can be in operation. The only problem is we don't have any employees here because nobody can afford to live in our town because so many remote workers have moved here, driving up the prices. We can't afford to pay these people the wages they need in order to live in this community. There's simply just nowhere to live. All right. And this is the same thing that she was basically explaining from her experience with restaurant owners in California, saying like, hey, we cannot afford to pay people enough to live here. They have to commute ever further distances, and they just can't do it they can't work for us anymore. It's just not feasible.
who departed from the applicant pool once they found out the cost of housing, and the loss of opportunities to serve customers and grow their businesses due to the lack of staff. To the people in that room, housing was failing, and no one was winning. Now, of course, this story is not unique. I'm sure each of you has heard many. But together they remind us, these collective stories, that housing is more than a basic need, although it is surely that. It is also an essential part of well-being. And well-being is an essential part of a thriving community and a healthy economy.
Okay, again, like you don't really have to, she doesn't have to explain this. Everybody knows this, right? If you don't have a stable place to live, you're not going to feel good about going off to work, going starting businesses, going and, just generally living life, right? It becomes very difficult. But the more stable your life is, the more likely you are to be more productive. You're going to be profitable, in a position in which that you will be profitable, or just just be able to grow as a person. But if that housing isn't stable, then, everything else becomes more difficult.
If we miss on something as fundamental as that, everyone feels it, and we are collectively worse off. So what should we do?
This is my favorite part. Now, this is where the Federal Reserve talks about what it is that they can do, the Fed themselves. Right? And a lot of people, they just want to blame the Federal Reserve, right? So here she is. She's just like, okay, what is it that we can do as the Federal Reserve, right, to try and alleviate this problem? Because we know that it's getting worse, right? Back in the 60s, one income could produce enough for an entire household. Today, two incomes can hardly make it. And it takes more than even that to get into the average income now, or average house off of the average income.
Well, as I said, collective problems call for collective solutions. So we will all have to participate. And I'd like to start with what the Fed can do. One lever that we and other regulatory agencies have is the CRA, which has brought you all together this week. And I know you had 2 plenary sessions on the topic.
So just to clarify, the CRA is the Community Reinvestment Act?
Yesterday, including with my colleagues Vice Chair Barr and Eric Belsky. The CRA has played a significant role in driving investment into low and moderate income communities, and its modernization will continue to be an important tool for ongoing housing solutions. But that's not the only way the Federal Reserve contributes.
Okay, so that's just one way to try and do this Community Reinvestment Act. Now she's going to start moving into another way, right? So that's one. CRA is a big deal, right? I'm going to set that aside for just a second. And now she's going to talk about the other thing.
We also contribute through our core monetary policy responsibilities to create a stable and healthy economy with price stability and full employment.
Okay, she just talked about the dual mandate, right? This is what they're required to do by Congress, is to have low inflation and stable prices, right? And full employment. That's the dual mandate.
Now, these goals were given to us by Congress, but they are the foundation of a sustainable economy that works for all. As you know, and I'm sure you know, we have been missing on our price stability.
All right, so here we go. We have been missing on our price stability. All right, she admits it right there.
Mandate for the past 2 years. Rising housing costs have been a key driver of these misses.
Right, because everybody knows housing is the most important part of everybody's life. Like most people, there is no other bigger expense in their life than rent or house payments, right? So if those things are on the move or going up, that is going to have the greatest impact on the inflationary pressures that we feel.
Boosting inflation in housing and inflation overall, and worsening affordability across the country. This burden has fallen especially harshly on those least able to bear it.
Right? Especially hard on the least who are able to bear it. This is who is suffering the most, right? Of course it is. The people who are living paycheck to paycheck and all of a sudden their expenses go up, they suffer the most from it.
And that is why the Federal Reserve has been so focused and resolute on getting inflation down.
Okay, so focused and resolute on getting inflation down.
Of course, we're deeply aware and recognize that higher interest rates also raise housing costs.
Right? Higher interest rates, they recognize higher interest rates raises housing costs. Okay? This is a major problem. Everybody feels it. Right? And it was just like, man, if our costs go up, we can't make it paycheck to paycheck anymore. We feel the burden from it. She recognizes this, that the higher interest rates are a burden.
But these adjustments in interest rates are temporary and needed to bring inflation down.
But these are temporary? What did she say? Hold on. She said, I got it right here. I got it highlighted. She says, but these adjustments are temporary and needed to bring inflation down. Right? These are needed. And this is a speech that was given just in March, not even that long ago. What, March, April, May, June? Okay, so like 4 months ago.
And history has repeatedly taught us that price stability, low inflation, is the single best mechanism to ensure sustainable growth.
Huh? So this is what they're attempting to do. They're going to have this higher, again, what did she say? Let me go back and say it. She said that history has taught us that price stability is the single best mechanism to ensure sustainable growth. Without this condition, the economy, the labor market, and the housing market all falter. This is, again, let her say that.
Without price stability, the economy, the labor market, and the housing market all falter.
All right. So maybe we should go back and just listen to that just a little bit more. Let me see if I can find it.
Are the foundation of a sustainable economy that works for all. As you know, and I'm sure you know, we have been missing on our price stability mandate for the past 2 years. Rising housing costs have been a key driver of these misses, boosting inflation in housing and inflation overall, and worsening affordability across the country. This burden has fallen especially harshly on those least able to bear it. And that is why the Federal Reserve has been so focused and resolute on getting inflation down.
Right? They said this is the hardest on this, so we're going to do our best to get inflation down. How do they do that? By raising interest rates, which is a burden on the people. But, right? Again, let's listen to her.
Of course, we're deeply aware and recognize that higher interest rates also raise housing costs. But these adjustments in interest rates are temporary and needed to bring inflation down. And history has repeatedly taught us that price stability, low inflation, is the single best mechanism to ensure sustainable growth.
Okay? So that's it. I mean, she says it right there, that if these prices are elevated, if inflation is elevated through like this particular market, right, through the housing market, if people are spending their money on it, she recognizes, and again, this is Fed president of the San Francisco Fed, President Daly. I saw somebody asking who was talking here. Now, when you think about that, they understand that. They know that that's the issue, and that by raising the interest rates, that is the attempt to try and keep the inflation from going any further higher, right? But that is the burden that a lot of people are feeling within the housing.
Without price stability, the economy, the labor market, and the housing market all falter.
They need the price stability.
You'll hear us again and again remind you that we are fully committed to getting the job done.
Fully committed to getting the job done. Think about that for just a minute, all right? This housing prices and everything that we are experiencing with the inflation that we have going on right now within this particular, I'm not talking about the inflation in the prices of all the little items that you're buying out there. I'm just talking about housing itself, all right? The issues that they are facing right now are still being faced, and they're still trying and committed to the outcome of bringing this issue in line with stability. I mean, she is straight up saying it, all right? Here, now she's going to go on. This is where it gets really interesting, all right? I mean, if you didn't think if that was interesting, this is when it gets interesting. That was just a reiteration of what we already know almost. All right, here we go.
To restoring price stability. But ultimately, the tools of the Fed are limited.
Tools of the Fed are limited.
Beyond what I just described.
Right? Just admit it. The tools of the Fed are limited. Like, what is it that they could possibly do to try and fix this problem, right? They only have the ability to adjust interest rates. That's it, right? Now, but it's not over, right? They recognize what can be done.
We can create the economic conditions for housing. Those are necessary conditions, but our efforts will never be sufficient to rebalance the housing equation.
Never be sufficient. Their efforts will never be sufficient.
That will
Let me back it up here a little bit.
Players in
Let me back it up so we can just hear it again, because that's important.
That we are fully committed to getting the job done, to restoring price stability. But ultimately, the tools of the Fed are limited. They don't go beyond what I just described. We can create the economic conditions for housing. Those are necessary conditions, but our efforts will never be sufficient to rebalance the housing equation.
Never be sufficient to rebalance the housing equation. The Federal Reserve just admitted, again, this is not the entire Federal Reserve's opinion. This is just one Fed president's opinion, but it's a very important one. And it's probably a very like-minded view of the rest of the Federal Reserve officials out there. And it may not be all of them, but I bet you a lot of them would probably agree with that.
That will require other important players in the economy.
Other important players.
Now, fortunately, when I look around, I see that so many have already taken up the charge and more are joining each day, including every single person in this room.
Okay, so you think about it. She's about ready to start describing what it is that can be done in order to try and bring more housing units. Because earlier in the speech, I guess I should have brought that up, they talk about the supply-demand imbalances, right? That there's obviously a need for supply. How do you get more supply? This is what she goes on to describe.
Governments, businesses, and communities are recognizing the problems, forging partnerships, and creating solutions, often taking on the third rails of policy.
I love this, the third rails of policy.
To do it. Take governments. They are really going after these third rails. Many are tackling long-standing barriers to development, like land use rules, zoning laws, and planning policy.
Right? Getting the hell out of the way. That's essentially what she is saying. Government is going like, well, we have to get the hell out of the way, right? Change the zoning laws, change a lot of these regulations that are out there to free up the ability to actually build more units.
And the idea is to change the way space is used, to allow for more housing in a location and sometimes denser housing. And ultimately, by doing that, increase supply and create greater affordability.
Right? Supply and demand. And I mean, again, like everybody says, waiting for a crash, no, it's not. What we have to do is figure out a way to start bringing more units to the market, right? More inventory. And she recognizes that. And they say, hey, we have to find these third rails or whatever it is. And essentially the third rail is literally government getting the hell out of the way. Saying, okay, go ahead, build that place in the backyard. Go ahead and, rezone this particular area so that we can have, multi-units or something in there. It's like, this is what, government is like literally having to get out of the way so that it can happen.
And states as diverse as Oregon, Maine, and Utah, and cities like Minneapolis, among others, are engaged in activities like these. Businesses and business organizations are also active.
Here's something that I found very interesting, what she's about ready to describe, right? Is because really, if you go back in history, I think this is a very similar story that has been told throughout history when you have issues with housing.
Actively working on housing, recognizing that to grow their businesses, employees need a secure place to live. That's what we heard in the Orange County visit. In my home state of California, the Santa Rosa Metro Chamber of Commerce is partnering to finance the construction of more homes. They really want workforce housing. They understand that a thriving community depends on housing for workers. And just down the road from here.
So you think about it, for a thriving community, they need housing for workers. Right? So if you want a business, if you want to be this mill, so to speak, in Montana, right? How is it that you provide an area for your housing or for your laborers to live, right?
And if you haven't had an opportunity to go, you might drive by. Just down the road from here in Donald, Oregon, GK Machine is building a housing development to support its manufacturing employees. Now, some of the San Francisco...
Hey, you want a place to live? Come work for us. You want a place to live? You have to work for us. In fact, where else are you going to live unless you work for us? That's kind of what I hear.
Fed team took a tour of GK Machine yesterday and saw the beginnings of that housing development. And they came back with a sense that there is power when businesses make those decisions, when they put housing in place and people come to work and they feel like they have that security. But this...
Isn't this interesting? I'm going to leave it right there because I think that's probably enough, and we should go into the discussion of what's happening here. But you can hear within the Federal Reserve speech coming from San Francisco President Daly that the idea of bringing more units to the housing market to make it more affordable is going to come from deregulation of government, right? So allowing, the zoning changes, or it's going to come from literally companies providing places for you to live. Now tell me, is that company going to be willing to let you live in their house unless you work for them? Right? See, this is what I see coming, and I look back in history, this is a very common thing. Like, also, I asked my wife about it because I'm not really into, Bible study stuff, right? But I know there's got to be something biblical that kind of refers to this kind of situation. And sure enough, she found a parable that Jesus would tell about the wicked tenants, right? And so essentially, these landowners would rent out their property, right? These whatever vineyards or whatever it is that they had, and these tenants would, basically work the land. And then when he would send his servants to go collect the rent, these wicked tenants would end up killing the servants, right? And then you would have issues with revolts and all kinds of crap that would start rising from that. So I found that to be kind of like a little interesting tale. Like, that's not the history of it. That was like a story that Jesus told to rile up the people or whatever. Now, I don't, again, I'm not trying to get into the religious aspect of it as far as that, because I'm just really not that kind of dude who can, even discuss that kind of level of things. But I just found it interesting that that story is told. Right? That's the key to it here. Right? And to understand what it is that's taken place, this isn't like a condition that was created. This is a condition in which that comes about. And we have to understand it for that level. See, a lot of times people are saying, oh man, they can do this, that, and the other thing to change the way that we are existing right now. And yeah, okay, I can see it. But to understand it for what it really is, there's a huge separation between the rich and the poor. It comes down to property owners, capitalist, and everybody else, right? And that's what's pisses people off about it, is that once they recognize that they are neither the capitalist nor the property owner, they're one of the everybody else, right? And that's what makes them mad. And they say, hey, we need a different system here. We need one that includes me as being in everybody else. But that's not the way it works. Economic forces are at play here, and to understand the position that we are now holding, right? I mean, this is very telling of what it is that's coming into the future. Think about this. People are all excited about lowering of interest rates, and she is essentially saying that if there is high housing costs, there is no way. There's no way. And that you're going to have to figure out some other way to have employees, because you're not going to find them being naturally having the ability to make rent in your area. You're going to have to provide them with a place to live. And if you want a place to live, you might find yourself having to work for them. Huh. What does that kind of sound like? All right. She from the House Finance Committee. That's not yelling. No, it's President Daly from the San Francisco Fed. Housing can't cost more than banks willing to lend to the average working class. If any of you vote Dem, then you deserve what you voted for. Please don't vote for Harris. Dexter, here's the problem, man. There's no way that you can vote for anybody who's going to fix the problem. So by thinking that you're voting Democrat is causing a problem, therefore leaves you with the ability to vote for somebody who would not cause a problem, and that simply doesn't exist. All right? It doesn't exist. It doesn't matter who you vote for. That doesn't change. All right? That doesn't, the issues that we are facing today are not going to get changed by anybody you vote for. It can't happen. Right? And understanding that for what it is then gives you the ability to now position yourself in a much different fashion, because what you're going to end up doing is positioning yourself to deal with the fact that this particular person is the president, and it doesn't make any difference. Like, these things don't change. I don't follow politics, and I follow housing markets, I follow monetary policy, I follow all kinds of stuff that has much more impact on my life personally, because what the Federal Reserve does with interest rates does have a direct impact on my life. Right? And so all this other stuff of what the Federal Reserve can and can't do going into the future is like, it's very subjective to the rules that they are now holding. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that the Federal Reserve only has a very limited amount of things that they can actually do. Did I get a super chat up there? I did, from Matthew, man. Thank you so much. Work from home is a part of what broke things. Supply of affordable housing remains the issue. The reason builders can't build that housing is input costs, restrictive zoning, restrictive zoning, permit, design, planning, and city permits. Yeah, I totally agree. Like, I absolutely agree that that is one of the major problems that we are now facing going into the future, is going to be these zoning laws, right? Like, the more regulation that you have, the more expense that you're going to have going into it. There's no way that you can inject a middleman into the system and make it cheaper. I don't care what you do, right? There's no way. There is only one way to make it cheaper, and that is you and the builder. That's it. That direct communication between the two of you. The moment that you add a bank into the system or anything else into it, the costs just start skyrocketing, because all those people need to get paid to provide the transaction for you. You can eliminate all that, and it's just the transaction between you and the builder, right? Think about it like in medical. Medical is a huge example of this, right? You go to get medical treatment, you don't use insurance, you pay cash, right? You go to, like, urgent care or something like that. It's really not that expensive. The moment that you add insurance to it, all of a sudden the cost of the same visit just goes through the roof. You got all these administration fees. They're charging you for shit that didn't take place. There's all kinds of stuff like tests and stuff that didn't need to happen, because they're billing the insurance, and it ultimately ends up costing you more, right? Like, literally, this is what ends up like, I've gone into urgent care with no insurance, cash and a strep throat, and said, hey man, I got this issue going on. I can't hardly swallow and I can't speak. And the guy looks in there and he says, yeah, we can do all the laboratory tests to confirm it, but yeah, I'm going to say that you have strep throat. I'm going to write you a prescription. Out you go, right? The whole thing cost me $150, right? Wife goes in with something going on with her ear, and next thing you know, it's like hundreds and hundreds of dollars later, and there's really no treatment that was ever done. And I'm like, what the hell is this? This is like the weirdest thing in the entire world. If you have insurance, all of a sudden you pay more, and everybody else is getting paid, and all this stuff that doesn't take place starts to get, like, manifested into realities that doesn't really need to occur. And I'm wondering, man, this is helping? Like, I had a transaction with me and this doctor. I did cash set. He looked in my throat. He says, yep, you're good. Here you go. Get out of here, man. Next. Right? That's the way it should go. That's the way it should be. It's like an easy $150 fix for my sore throat. Awesome. All right? But that's not the way we operate. And everything is convoluted like that, so that people who don't really do anything except for process paperwork can get a job. Like, I mean, they're not providing anything really. Like, the only thing that in medical is provided is the doctor itself. Now I get it, like the hospital and the scientific research and all the equipment and all this other stuff, it costs money. But when you start throwing in all these administration fees and charges for testings and stuff that don't really need to take place, that is not making the medical industry efficient, right? Like any system, it doesn't matter whether it's medical, anything is like this, right? Wow, 720 people watching. That is awesome. Thank you all for hitting that like button. We got 132 people who have hit the like button with 721 people watching. Go hit that like button. We get it up to 600 people who have hit that like button. This YouTube algorithm will, or the YouTube algorithm will pick up this video and spread it around for tons of more people to join in. I think this is really critical information. I mean, again, if I didn't leave the link down in the description, what I am reading from is San Francisco Fed President Mary Daly, and the title of this is Home Truths Changing the Conversation on Housing. And this was given March 6th, 2024. So anyway, you should just be able to Google any of that stuff and find it. Daly's speech, March 6th, 2024 will probably pop right up. Very important stuff. All right, moving on down here. You're getting to a huge point. I've been screaming about the bloat in insurance and office work for decade. Yeah. What's up, all-nighter? Yeah. Or smoke that thumbs up like Cheech and Chong. Yeah, thank you very much, there, all-nighter. Okay. Ended up on my homepage, never watched before, just subscribed. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. You're going to find this information is quite unique to a lot of the other economic information or YouTube economist out there. Even the mainstream media, I just share information that is so much different from what a lot of these other people who are researching and what it is that they are researching. I dive straight into the monetary policy coming from the Federal Reserve statements themselves, the communications they have to the other central bankers, and it's mainly done through these speeches. And breaking this stuff down the way I do gives us a much better insight in what it is that the Federal Reserve is planning and thinking going into the future. The mainstream media is propagandized straight up 100%. I have yet to find any article within the mainstream media that describes monetary policy strategy coming from the Federal Reserve in the real sense of what it is. I mean, dating it back to like speeches like this one, monetary policy strategies for a low neutral interest rate world, there is certain things that are taking place within the economy right now that the Federal Reserve needed to, in order to conduct themselves, in order to survive, and mainly they needed an elevated inflation expectation. And in fact, he says it right here. This is John Williams' speech. This was given November 30th, 2018. And this is one of the most profound statements given within a speech that was given before the pandemic that really describes what was about ready to take place. Today, we face an altogether different set of problems stemming from a very low neutral interest rate. That is the short-term real interest rate that is consistent with an economy operating at its potential alongside low and stable inflation. Here we go. Ironically, the problem we need to solve these days is the risk of inflation that is persistently too low rather than too high. The problem we need to solve is the risk of inflation that is persistently too low rather than too high. They have inflation persistently too high, exactly in line with the problem they needed to solve. They got it, right? They got it. And people don't understand that this is the monetary policy that they needed in order to save themselves from absolute failure. Monetary policy through interest rate adjustments came to an end during the great financial crisis, and they hit the lower bound of zero. People don't know it though. And it's because of the forward guidance jawboning and belief of inflationary scenarios that come from the money printer and the actual severing of the supply chain that created the inflationary pressures that we had experienced, that allowed the Federal Reserve to regain a lot of their ammo by raising the Fed funds rate. This is something that they needed. In fact, you don't believe it? Look at, go back into this speech and they say it, right? This is before, they could not find inflation in 2018. They just couldn't, right? They go back and they were like, man, we have a 2% target. We failed to achieve it. We cannot achieve it. Even expanding the balance sheet from $850 billion to over $4.5 trillion, quantitative easing 1, 2, 3, and 4, hyperinflation scenario spread it throughout the mainstream media, and it still failed to produce the inflationary scenario they were looking for, right? Come 2019, you had Donald Trump out there. There's no inflation. The Fed should be printing money, right? How many times did we talk about that? I love saying that, right? Because I won't let it go. I won't let that go. There will never be a time throughout my entire life that I will not, be referring back to that statement. Most people forget. I won't. And I will not let them forget. Just much like I will not let John Williams pretend that this speech doesn't exist. Here we go. The second option, average inflation targeting, whereby the central bank purposefully aims to achieve an above target inflation rate in good times. How the hell do you plan on doing that, Mr. Williams? There's no way that you could achieve an inflation rate that was above the target range, even though you had done all this quantitative easing and jawboning and forward guidance and belief that there was going to be hyperinflation. It didn't do it. How are you planning on getting an average inflation rate over time where you have inflation purposefully aimed to achieve inflation that is purposefully aimed to achieve an above target inflation rate in good times when the lower bound is not constrained? Properly designed and implemented, such an overshoot can offset the inflation undershoot during bad times. You mean like after the great financial crisis and you failed to achieve the 2% target? You're telling me that if you have inflation above 2% for some time, that you could actually make up for it? Is that what you're trying to say? Let me read it again. Properly designed and implemented, such an overshoot can offset the inflation undershoot during bad times so that the long run average inflation rate and inflation expectations are in line with the target. Wow. Average inflation rate over time, talked about back in 2018, way before pandemic, way before any of that severing of the supply chain, way before any of that stuff, right? And that's it. All right. So where is it? Let me see if I can find it here. And so once we understand that it was average inflation rate over time that the Federal Reserve was actually attempting to achieve and not a 2% target, when we go back and we look at some of the things that are taking place right now and we think about how the inflation scenario doesn't seem to want to come down, it just, let me get this up here. Sorry, guys. There we go. It doesn't seem to want to come down. We wonder what the hell is going on, right? The Federal Reserve, are they going to cut? Are they not going to cut? We don't know what they're going to cut. Well, that's part of the credible threat theory. As long as they can keep that idea of what it is that's going to happen with monetary policy and the interest rate cuts or the hikes, as long as they can keep that open-ended and people don't know exactly what's going to happen, they can then use their jawboning presence out there on the mainstream media to put the perception within the people that they have 100% belief that there's going to be a September rate cut. The Fed said nothing about it. They said if conditions stay the same, which they never do, but if conditions stay the same, then rate cuts would be on the table. Conditions never stay the same. I don't know where the hell people think that conditions stay the same. They don't, ever. Not in the history of time has a condition ever stayed the same. Right? It's like saying that if the tide doesn't go out, well, why wouldn't the tide go out? Why wouldn't the sun come up? Why, that doesn't make any sense. Conditions change. So making that statement was just complete garbage. It was hot air. If these conditions stay the same, well, that ain't going to happen. So everything you say after this is horseshit. Right? I mean, that's really the reality. All right. Let's take this back to what is really taking place within the Federal Reserve's monetary policy. Because we already knew back here in 2018 that what they absolutely needed for their monetary policy was an inflation expectation that was persistently too high, and that they could go for an average inflation rate over time to try and make up from the shortfalls of 2%. Okay, what did Jerome Powell have to say in August of 2020? Right? We have made important changes with regard to the price stability side of our mandate. The price stability side of your mandate, you made important changes. Does everybody else know about this, or just you? Right? You and the uneducated economist, because he won't let you let it go, right? It keeps bringing back up. All right. Our long run goal continues to be the inflation rate of 2%. Our statement emphasizes that our actions to achieve both sides of the dual mandate will be most effective if the long-term inflation expectations remain well anchored at 2%. However, here we go. If inflation runs below 2% following economic downturns but never moves above 2%, even when the economy is strong, then over time inflation will average less than 2%. Let me take this back real quick and talk about something that John Williams had to say in November of 2018. He says, let me give you, oh, here we go. As a result of the inherent asymmetry introduced by the lower bound on interest rates, an inflation targeting central bank could experience inflation that is below target once we consider the average inflation rate over periods when policy is constrained and those when it is not. Inflation on average below the target level. Inflation expectations will likely slip below the target rate as well. This was a major concern, right? So, however, if inflation runs below 2% following economic downturns but never moves above 2%, even when the economy is strong, then over time, inflation will average less than 2%. Okay, a simple illustration going back to John Williams, right? He says this, say that 80% of the time, the lower bound on interest rate does not constrain policy and the central bank aims for 2% target inflation rate. During these good times, inflation targeting central bank aims to keep inflation near 2%. But 20% of the time, the economy falls into a recession that is so severe, that's severe enough to, falls into a recession that's severe enough that the lower bound constrains policy, meaning they run into zero and they can't drop interest rates anymore to stimulate it. Assuming that during these periods, inflation averages only 1%. So 80% of the time, inflation is about 1.8%. As a consequence, inflation expectations are likely to become anchored at a long-run average of 1.8% below the desired 2% target. Now, I know that was very complicated, but the point is that he was describing exactly what it was that was taking place prior to the pandemic when you had Donald Trump out there saying there's no inflation, right? It's running below the 2% target. Big problem. Big giant problem that these people were facing. Okay. How many people, put your hand up in the air if this is the first time you've ever heard this kind of information, all right? Unless you've been following my channel, I don't think you've been hearing it anywhere else unless you happen to read all these speeches coming from the Federal Reserve over the last 15, 20 years. Right? I don't mean to sound like cocky or arrogant, but dang, this stuff is super important and nobody seems to be discussing it on this level. All right, we're moving on here. Households and businesses will come to expect this result, talking about inflation being too low, and meaning that inflation expectations would tend to move below our inflation goal and pull realized inflation down. To prevent this outcome and the adverse dynamics that could ensue, our new statement indicates we will seek to achieve inflation that averages 2% over time. Therefore, following periods when inflation has been running below 2%, much like the previous 15 years that we have experienced, right? When inflation has been running below 2%, appropriate monetary policy will likely aim to achieve inflation moderately above 2% for some time. In seeking to achieve inflation that averages 2% over time, we are thus not tying ourselves to a particular mathematical formula that defines the average. Well, isn't that convenient, right? They don't have a mathematical formula for figuring this out. Thus, our approach could be viewed as flexible form of average inflation targeting. Flexible average inflation targeting. FAIT. Go and Google it. Go Google FAIT, flexible average inflation targeting, and type in Federal Reserve after that. And go and look at all the massive amounts of documents and talking about flexible average inflation targeting there is coming from the Federal Reserve, but yet you will find no articles about it. No news articles. They don't know what average inflation targeting is. They all think it's a 2% target. They don't know what 2% target over time means. They don't know what the 2% goal is, the 2% objective. Right? Our decision about appropriate monetary policy will continue to reflect a broad array of considerations and will not be dictated by any formula. Of course, if excessive inflationary pressures were to build or inflation expectations were to ratchet above levels consistent with our goal, we would not hesitate to act. Everything what we are experiencing right now is very much in line with what it is that the Federal Reserve is looking to do. Like, I have very little doubt in my mind. Going all the way back to these speeches, the strategy is still being played out. They did not invent this stuff during the pandemic. They had it well orchestrated. I mean, you go back through these speeches and you can just see it. It's obvious, right? Problem is, nobody goes through these speeches and have pieced it together like I have. Right? And like, to me, I can't see it any other way. All these people are like, dude, you're so wrong. They have, like, they're totally going to do this for the election. And I'm like, no, I went through 150 speeches over the last couple of years here, and I can't find one single statement that even comes close to, validating that statement. No, I don't think so. All right, let's read some more of these super chats here. Man, thank you everybody who has been joining the channel. You are going to get a lot of value out of the channel, out of those membership-only videos. Thank you. We got Dagfin, and Loris Jones. You guys are so awesome. Thank you so much for joining. Again, it's $1 a month. You get access to all kinds of membership-only videos. We're probably going to break down Daly's speech. We'll do that in a live stream, a members-only live stream at some point. We'll probably do that here this week and go over that thing word for word. Again, like, go and Google it yourself, or if I haven't, I forgot if I left it down in the description. I'm sorry. If I haven't, I will come back and I will leave a link down in the description for you guys to that speech. In that, link, you will be able to find the video that I was listening to, with her talking. You can go and listen to it for yourself. Internalize this information. Understand it from the Fed's point of view. It doesn't matter what these economists say. It doesn't matter what I say. It doesn't matter what anybody, all these politicians, doesn't matter what they say. They are not in charge of monetary policy. The Federal Reserve is. These people, the FOMC, not even Powell. Powell's not in charge of the monetary policy. People say, man, we got to get Powell out of there. Why? You want somebody else to tell you the story? That's the only difference, is the voice that's going to be coming from the FOMC. Powell is just a spokesperson. He is not the decision maker. It's very important. He makes the decision on his own vote, right? That's the decision that he makes. But there's other voting members of the FOMC, and they also vote on monetary policy. And listening to what the Federal Reserve officials are saying about the conditions that we are in and understanding it from their point of view is the only way that we can truly internalize this stuff so we can make the best decisions for ourselves. Nobody out there is talking about this kind of stuff, right? Monetary policy strategies for a low neutral interest rate world. I have broken this speech down. I don't know. I probably brought this thing up 500 times, more, 1,000 times on my channel, right? Because I won't let it go, and I won't let other people forget that it was said. Right? All these people who are thinking that they're flying off the seat of their pants, they're wrong. They're making wrong decisions. They're informing you in the wrong way. Infamous NYC, thank you so much for the $5. Did they create a war to keep oil prices higher to create inflation, since everything is a derivative of energy? I believe it's all by design. I mean, there was a time when I used to dive into conspiracy theories of such nature, and what I have come to the conclusion of is that the economic forces that we are experiencing today and the conditions of which that we are now living in a fiat currency world, as opposed to like something like a gold standard, the underlying economic forces are still at play, but the obscurities that we get from it, like the manipulation that people can take action inside of this economy, is vast. It's huge, right? And so when we see these people have an incredible amount of power from what it is that they have done over time, especially when it comes to, like, oil and energy and some of those impacts to, society as a giant whole, we think about it as being done on purpose to create the situation that we are now in. And I don't see it that way. I see the situation we are now in has given these people the ability to do what they do. There's a major difference inside of that. And understanding it from that level then gives you, it's just like, okay, how do you change this? You really can't. You have to understand it for what it is and why it's taken place so that you can best position yourselves. See, my whole point on starting this channel and diving as deep into the Federal Reserve as much as I did was to try and disassemble the Federal Reserve. like to try and figure out what it is that we need to do in order to get the Federal Reserve out of our lives. The more I dive into this stuff, the more I realize, man, you know how painful of an experience and devastating it will be for the majority of the people because they have no clue of how this thing actually works? They would face such pain and misery the moment that the Federal Reserve failed to exist. Now, I personally think that I would do okay because I've like thought about it. Like, I've actually is like, okay, what would it be like to have no Federal Reserve in our system and that we would be working off our own skills in a commodity-based currency, like even a limited currency like Bitcoin or gold or something, like, understanding what Triffin's dilemma would be like. Understanding Gresham's law, understanding how Cantillon effect would work, would end up leaving most people inside of this nation completely miserable in poverty. It would suck for them, right? Now, if you really want to disassemble the Federal Reserve, come on, let's join it, man. Dive into this information with me, because if everybody knew what it is that I know about the Federal Reserve, and a lot of people here on this channel, I mean, there's only 900 members to the channel. We're getting close to 1,000. Once we get it up to 1,000, we're going to have an explosive, I believe, an explosive exponential run within this membership of this channel. I believe that people will finally be tuning into the idea that, man, the monetary policy that has been pushed out there to through the mainstream media is completely inaccurate, and the growth of this channel is going to grow as people finally realize, crap, they have lied to us. The credible threat theory is real, right? Understanding that the Fed funds rate was now an ineffective tool for stimulating the economy because hitting the lower bound of 0 could not stimulate the economy far enough below the neutral interest rate. And that regaining the neutral interest rate is probably one of the most important things that the Federal Reserve can do right now in order to save themselves. And in order to raise the neutral interest rate, they have to have an elevated inflation expectation that is persistent going into the future. Again, part of their monetary policy, right? The problem they needed to solve was an inflation expectation that was persistently too high rather than too low. There was 3 main global trends that drove down the neutral interest rate over the course of the last 25 years. See, people don't even know this stuff. They don't know about the neutral interest rate. They have no clue of what that is. I say it out loud and they're like, what the hell is a neutral interest rate? The neutral interest rate is the rate that is neither accommodating nor restricting the economy. And the neutral interest rate was very low, like close to 0. That means when the Fed dropped interest rates to 0, it wasn't going far enough below neutral in order to stimulate the economy. It became an ineffective tool for creating the inflationary scenario. All the way up since the early 80s, okay? Lowering interest rates would stimulate the economy. They would lower it 5%, boom, people would run out, buy houses, cars, go on vacation, all kinds of people would be spending money in the economy. It worked awesome, right? Many businesses would start hiring. You'd have all kinds of employment taking place, all kinds of consumption happening. Inflation was found. But then eventually they found that the neutral interest rate had fallen so far low to 0 that stimulating the economy with interest rate adjustments failed. It didn't work. You can see it through the quantitative easing 1, 2, 3, and 4. Lower bound of 0 Fed funds rate. All that historically low unemployment, all that stuff failed to produce the inflationary scenario the Fed was looking for. It's because actually low interest rates is actually a deflationary pressure on the economy. It has to do with the return on capital investment. So, like understanding that if you put your money towards something that has a low interest rate, by the time you get a return on that interest, it doesn't beat the inflationary scenario. You have less purchasing power going into the future. That is deflationary. Low interest rates is a deflationary concept. All right. I don't even know where I was going. All right, moving on. What was that other one? Infamous NYC with another $10, man. Thank you so much. Was America targeting Europe due to the Great Reset? Sanctions killed German economy. Russian oil just got refined by India and funneled into Germany just at higher prices, killing their manufacturing. Well, I think that's probably more of symptoms of the Cantillon effect. All right. I think that's probably more of what you're witnessing is that the moment that you start to put like sanctions or tariffs, right, the natural desire to find a more efficient system in order to profit begins to, even if it's like, if it's more expensive going this way and you start going around, right? And, to try and, circumvent the tariffs or the subsidies, or, or try and get subsidies or whatever it is, right? This is a result of the economic forces that are now taking place. This isn't a result of the government action, right? This is the government's action needing to take place as a result of the economic forces that are now happening. Like if the industriousness of the people weren't there to rise and produce, then the powers wouldn't have the ability to come in and start regulating. Like you actually have to rise first in order for there to be governance. And so you have to, like, the economic forces occur first before the government comes in and tries to deal with it. Even though it looks the other way around, right? Most people see it the other way around because government action is so intrusive and it's so like belligerent and all this other stuff. But really, it's the underlying economic forces that are happening. And it's best to understand it from that fashion. Like once you understand the Cantillon effect and how it is that manufacturing left the United States, you can't really expect a politician to come up and say, I know a great way to bring manufacturing back to the United States. We'll tax the hell out of them and subsidy the hell out of us. And this is going to be a wonderful concept. And it'll be like, wow, man, Cantillon effect is really hitting hard, isn't it? I mean, that's what's really happening, because ultimately you shouldn't be here at all. Government shouldn't be involved at all. Like if government wasn't involved at all, then we would be awesome. We would be like in the free market condition, just swimming in profit and ability and skills. Like what our skills and our, we rise and fall on our own merit from that point, right? Not like, hey, we can't rise because those people have a cheaper product. You have to tariff them so that I can exist, right? That's not, what the hell's that? All right. Cipher Solutions, $1.99. Thank you so much. 6% inbound interest rate Bud Watch. 6% inbound interest rate Bud Watch. Stay off of BTC. Do your own research. Cipher, I am trying to get a hold of one Bitcoin. Like I am looking forward to the day that I have one Bitcoin in my possession, whatever the hell that's supposed to mean. And I have no idea what I'm going to do with it after that. I just want that one Bitcoin. Now, some people might think it's a scam. Other people say don't do it. It's like, hey, it's my money. I can do whatever I want with it. And I look at the position that I have with Bitcoin right now, and it is by far the biggest position out of everything I have in my portfolio, except for maybe the equity in the house or something like that. But that was like, that's unrealistic what happened with the house. Like that's not something that I would like count on as far as any kind of reasonable expectation of going into the future. But who knows. And I have zero expectation of Bitcoin, right? So silver is a position in which that I am taking as an insurance policy. It's a speculation of Bitcoin. I have no hopes or dreams for it. My house is a place to live, right? I have a little stock portfolio that I'm building up. Like I have very little fear, fear of anything out there. I mean, to me, it's just like, hey, whatever happens, happens. I don't care. It's not for me to be pissed or happy about anything that's going on within the economy. It's just up to me to position myself to deal with it in the best that I possibly can. That's it. That's it. All right, 761 people. Go hit that like button. We got 278 likes. We can have it up to 300 here in no time. 400 is where we really should be at right now. All right, let's go back to some of these comments here. Gold will be repriced. Go gold. Maybe. I put my expectations on gold very low, right? It's an insurance policy. That's all it is to me. Like, if you have something that is outside of that third-party claim where you do not have to rely on government or a bank or an app or an envelope or a phone call or any of that other stuff, you are separating yourself and you are now independent. Right? Independent of everything else out there. You are required to secure it. That's it. Nobody else is responsible and nobody else is going to participate. And now that is pretty cool. You can have that on a lesser extent with Bitcoin, but for the most part, it can only be done with gold and silver. All right. Another super chat. Gold to 20K. Hey, I'm a fan of gold. I am. I mean, I just said it. Looks like I am, but I'm also reasonable in the expectations of where it's going to go. If it goes to 20K, hey, that's cool, right? But I don't. I have my again, like I fell for that back in the day with $500 an ounce silver and Max Kaiser and crash JP Morgan and global insurrection against banker occupation. And hey, if we all band together, man, we're all going to see, silver go to the moon, and we're all going to be, driving Lambos and stuff. Like, okay, I abandoned that. Then, like, that's not part of my thoughts anymore, right? Because that's like, it's not, to me, that's not a realistic way of looking at it. Uh, let's see here. Thanks for the membership. Yeah. Somebody has been gifting memberships, and I so appreciate it. Like, it's really cool. Like, what I think has happened, and I'm not exactly positive, but it appears to be this way, is that people who have been gifted memberships are actually gifting memberships out there, like paying it forward. Like they're forcing the exponential growth of this channel. They're forcing this information out there to their friends and family, saying, "Hey, you got to go and check out this monetary policy." Like I'm not a college graduate. I barely graduated high school. I stutter when I read. I had a hell of a reading disability growing up and stuff like that. I'm not somebody who is just like, like the smartest dude in the world. I get that part, right? Here's the thing, like I have broken this stuff down in a way that I don't feel a lot of other people have. Now, I'm not trying to brag it up, but when I was a kid, like the teachers, my parents, everybody knew, like, hey, this kid is not keeping up with the rest of the students out there. They're just not reading and all this other stuff. They sent me up to OSU, right? Or up to Oregon State University. I was up there for a couple of days. They did all these like, tests on me to, try and figure out what it is that I had an issue with, right? I had a reading disability. Like I could like reading retention was the problem. I could read this stuff or I would read it, but I couldn't retain it in my head, right? And so as they were going through all these studies, trying to figure out what it is that, that they could do to try and, get me back up and learning and doing all this other stuff for keeping up with the rest of the kids, they found that my problem solving abilities were off the charts. Like they would give me these little mind game puzzles, little brain teasers and stuff like that. And I loved them, man. I would like knock these things out. And I've always loved them. Like there was a time I had a whole collection of these things and, we would sit around and drink and play with these little brain games and stuff. And that was the way like I have always been. Well, as time went on, I realized that it's not necessarily a learning disability that I had. I had a learning disability with the way that they were teaching, right? And that was the major issue that I was facing. And so once I learned how to teach myself, like how to able to absorb information, I realized that, man, I love economics. I love monetary policies, like, or just not necessarily monetary policy, but I just loved economics. I loved coin collecting. I loved currencies. I love this kind of like, you know, this hobby of information or understanding. And I just kept diving deeper into it. Well, I believe those problem solving skills that I had since I was a kid, which was the only skills that I could really use in order to get by, that were essentially I enhanced them or whatever, has given me the ability to now break this stuff down in a way that I don't feel a lot of people have. And again, I'm not trying to brag it up, but dang, like this information is so unique and yet it seems so clear to me. Like it seems so obvious, and I don't understand why it is that the mainstream media doesn't pick up on more of this stuff, like the low neutral interest rate and the average inflation rate over time. Like this is literally like the biggest issues that the Federal Reserve was facing over the course of the few years, and they have now got a lot of their ammo back. They got the inflation expectation elevated. They have solving a lot of the problems that they were facing back in the day, and nobody wants to communicate that. Like everybody wants to forget about it or just pretend that it doesn't exist or just doesn't know, right? And so here we are. This is the results of that. All right, let's go check out another super chats here. All right, stop watching mainstream. Geez, all fake. Well, no, you have to. That's the problem, Cypher, is that you do have to watch the mainstream media because if you now understand the credible threat, right? Understand the credible threat theory and how that operates, you have to look at the mainstream media to understand what it is that they're trying to communicate, because that is the monetary policy. Like if you didn't listen to it, then you wouldn't know what the monetary policy is. The monetary policy is coming through the communications of the mainstream media. It's not the direct communication, it's the expectations that are now received by the market through that communication. Think about it. They have done nothing different. Literally nothing different over the course of the last few weeks, but yet you're seeing mortgage rates drop. Why? Because they expect mortgage rates to come down, or they expect interest rates to come down in September. 100% guarantee of it. Like that's how much the market is believing it. It's not the case. It's not the reality of the situation, but yet they're trying to get ahead of the Federal Reserve, and because of the communication coming from the Federal Reserve, they are now acting as if those rate cuts had taken place. Right? Super important to understand it. Like once you see it within the mainstream media, if you didn't watch it, then you wouldn't know that's what was taking place. Right? Finding it through there, and then looking at the communication of what Mary Daly said here through the, from the San Francisco Fed. Right? It's absorb it all, right, and view it from a distance. All right, moving on here. Hey, Tackle Farms, man, you really loaded me up the other day, man. Thank you so much for the super chats, and again with the $10 today. Bitcoin is much easier to move around the world, obviously, excuse me, and much cheaper. Been in that world since 2017. First BTC was 1,825. Not mad right now. That's what you paid? Like I remember when I tried to get a Bitcoin, when I first heard about it, it was $18. Like I was going to try and pick up a Bitcoin for $18, and then I was going to do two of them. And then I got my buddy to download a wallet, and we were going to throw it around a little bit just to see how it worked. And that was my whole intention for Bitcoin, but I never did pick it up. And even if I had, I probably would have lost it anyway because that computer crashed and I wasn't able to get it back. So, and at the time I didn't know anything about it. Yeah. All right, moving down here. Oop, there's another one. Let's go check that out. All right, Matthew, thank you so much. Lumberjack Landlord. The government being someone's landlord is far scarier than the system we have in place. That is checkmate if they own your housing too. I totally agree. I agree, Matthew. Like this is what's like, I think some of the most scariest part of what it is that we are going through right now is that this sheer demand of the people themselves to get government involved. It's just like it's literally like frightening to think about how much of a consequence it is to have government involved in your life, and then the sheer amount of demand coming from the people right now looking for government to do something. Right? And that is scary. That right there is scary as hell. See, if, again, like I got to go put this back on my desk, but right here, right? This document is meant to limit government. You do not want them in your life. You don't want them involved. This is, and it's, I mean, we can sit here and debate that all day long if you like, but these guys left us just this side of anarchy. Right? And said, hey, be very careful. Here's a document to, don't let government step outside of these confines of this thing. Right? Here you go. Take this and be careful. Right? And people aren't careful. They don't know. Like they look at that and they're like, what the hell do you got in your hand? And they're like, it's the Constitution. Never read it. Nope. You know your rights? Yeah, I know the freedom of speech and the right to bear arms. You know any others? Probably not. All right? Very few. It's scary. Like that's scary to me. Right? And that's why I just don't care about politics anymore, is because they don't stay in the confines of this. Like, what's the point? It was just like, why don't you, pick your poison? It's just like, ugh, and I'm not involved in that. I don't vote for evil, Thank you, Matthew. I really appreciate the $5 too. And I totally agree. And that's what's scary about it is like the sheer amount of people who not only feel that there's like government can help them, but then are absolutely demanding that government help them. And yet there's a bunch of people that are like, no, like, yeah, we understand there's a separation between the rich and the poor that's taken place, but damn, please do not get government to try and help. It's not going to work. right? What they are going to do is socialistic type of behaviors, communistic type of behaviors, tyrannical type of behaviors. That's the only thing they can do, right? These guys were setting it up for what you can do. All right. They communicate with what is that? Gematria? Gematria? I have no idea what that word is, bro. That's how I'm uneducated, man. You're gonna have to do a little bit smaller words. Or words that I would recognize. All right. Matthew, thank you so much again. $5. Only the poor and lower middle class beg for the government to do more because largely they won't do for themselves. Yeah, and I can agree in a lot of sense that, if you have no idea what to do, then yeah, you're going to beg for help, right? I mean, you're going to beg for help because that's like, otherwise you just don't know, man. You're trying as hard as you can. You show up every day, but you just don't know what it is that you're supposed to be doing. Like you weren't taught the skills. You weren't like, you're a victim of your upbringing, all the issues that come from it. And it's hard to face that reality, but that is exactly the situation, right? They won't do it for themselves because they don't know how. Right? They weren't taught. The schools don't teach them how to do it. Ultimately, you have to figure it out for yourselves. You have to suffer the consequences of being in a position in which that you are not satisfied with, and finally say, this is it. I can't take it anymore. I don't know what it is that I need to do, but I know that nobody else is coming to help, and I have to figure it out myself. Step one, figure out how to earn $1. Figure out how to earn $1 on the online. Like that's my suggestion is figure out how to earn $1 with your skills outside of your 9 to 5 job, right? Figure it out. I don't care how you do it. Blog, selling something, create something, do something, right? Figure out $1 outside of your normal 9 to 5 job, and then figure out how to make that $2, and then $4, and then $8. And believe me, if you are in that mindset, you will no longer be begging government to do anything for you. You will be looking to do everything for yourself because you're going to know that's the only way to be independent. I mean, these guys all of a sudden come in and it's like, here, I'm going to help you out here a little bit. Here's $100. Here's a cell phone. Here's some food. Here's, all this money. And you're like, oh God, the relief. Thank you. And then one day they're like, I'm sorry. We're going to have to take the $100 away and your cell phone away. Now, how painful of an experience is that? All right. You don't want that experience. Well, don't ask for it to begin with. Then you don't have to worry about them taking it from you. If you don't take anything from them, they can't take anything from you. Yeah. Wow. Man, I hope I'm saying your name right. Tackle Farms, man. Really, thank you so much, man. Moved a whole Bitcoin in 2017 in our local bowling alley from phone to phone. Wrote my buddy a check for $6,325. I had it in 2 minutes. Best check I ever wrote. Haha, security of your own crypto is massive today, but take custody. Yeah, I agree. Like I have Bitcoin in several locations, but the majority of it I have at Coinbase. And now I know I'm gonna catch a lot of hell for doing that, and that if you don't hold it, you don't own it, and all that other stuff. Okay, that's great. I do own some Bitcoin outside of Coinbase, but I have the majority of it with Coinbase simply because I lost the keys to a Ethereum wallet. And there's Ethereum in there, and it's like, and there's tokens that are showing up in that wallet, and I have no access, and I don't even I don't know if they're just like forks or just, because the wallet exists, people are throwing, I don't know what the hell, but I have the public key so I can see what's in it, and it just bums me out every time I look at it. So I don't even look at it anymore. But understanding that it was the failure of being secure with my keys that has now put me in that position with that Ethereum wallet. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to take my chances with Coinbase. And I'm just going to go ahead and put it with Coinbase. I don't care that it's a third party. I get it. I have my security away from the third party claim with silver and gold, which I think is a much more secure third party insurance, like away from the third party insurance. Right? My crypto is literally a weird speculation in my mind, and I have no expectations from it. So again, I trust Coinbase enough that I can keep it with them. I trust them as much as I trust any other bank. How about that? Uh, Matthew, $2. This is why schools are such a colossal failure. Yeah, I really agree. And it's it's also sad to think, like, the reality of it is that the impression of what the economy is really set in at a younger age. Like your habits with money, your habits with savings, your understanding of like debt and stuff like that. That all comes about at a very young age. And when you're older trying to figure this stuff out, it's like you got to change literally your subconscious beliefs of what money is out there because you were raised in a particular fashion, like the way your parents handled money. Or maybe just, experiencing like, a bankruptcy or foreclosure when you were a child will leave an impression on you about the economy that is very impactful on the rest of your life. And so, again, like it's built into our subconscious. Again, like I've said this so many times, economics is the mechanical version of consciousness. Right? So the way you act, the way you feel, the way you are conducting yourself is reflected right into your personal economy and how it is that your business dealings are going, how much money you earn, all this stuff, right? How much debt you accrue. It's deep rooted, right? Very deep. Tackle Farms, $1.99. Pronounced correctly. Thanks, brother. Okay. Thank you very much, man. I really appreciate all the support. Both you and Matthew, guys. I mean, and everybody, like not just you and Matthew. I mean, you and Matthew are great. Everybody is great here. I mean, the contributions and support for the channel, all the, encouragement, and then all the wonderful comments that come enhancing this discussion, right? Taking it a little bit further, like beyond just the superficial ideas of like, Fed is bad, they destroy you. How do we get deeper into it? How do we understand this for ourselves in a way that then says, hey, they're not good or bad, they just are. And there's people out there who are succeeding and killing it out there and doing quite well. How do we also do for ourselves in a fashion that is similar to those other people who are doing it right now? Like, people, yeah, it's a bad economy, whatever. Okay, good economy, bad economy, it doesn't make any difference. There are people who are killing it and there are people who are failing at the exact same time. And so it's best to position ourselves in a way that we kill it, that we make it for ourselves. Like believing that there is going to be hope and change is ridiculous. Right? It's ridiculous. Don't believe in hope and change. Hope and change comes from your own beliefs, not from some other outside expectations. Gosh, look at it just loading up here. My gosh, guys, you're just so cool. Let's check out these super chats. Tackle Farms again with the 1999. I did get hacked on Coinbase. Growing pains. Lost 60K. I use Gemini to buy and move it to my hard wallet. It stays in my fireproof safe. I use it for family vacations, whatever I have when I die goes to the kids. Yeah, I do get a little nervous about getting hacked. Because if somebody basically gets into your account or whatever like that, they can move that, those coins out of there, and once they're gone, they're gone. So I do have, a low level fear of that taking place, but I'm pretty secure with like the way I handle. Like I'm pretty paranoid. So like I have a password keeper and I have a million passwords. I don't use the same password for anything, and all my passwords are like 20, 30 digits long, hashtag kind of keys of symbols and numbers and stuff. Like it would be very difficult to just stumble across my password. If I just didn't straight up give it to you. And again, like, I don't use the same password for any website. So even if one particular website was to happen to get my particular password, they would not be able to use that credential for any other website because it wouldn't work. And it's funny because I've seen where certain things come in, like, attempts to change passwords. Like we'll get, I'll see an email like, hey, an attempt to change your password. And I'm like, good luck with that, way, And so, I don't follow links. I don't phishing links. Like I am so paranoid over phishing links. And if there's something that comes in and says, "Hey, you need to log in," I'm like, "Oh no, I ain't logging in through an email." All right, Matthew, again with the $10. Thank you so much. Exactly right. They make uninformed adults, and many will just go through life that way. Those that break away get it. That's the whole reason public school systems do what they do. Well done, UE. Yeah, and I agree. And like, I think probably, like it's easily recognizable for those who went through the public school systems and almost and like pretty much failing the public school systems. Like, like I cheated. Like I cheated my way through high school. And I mean, I don't like saying that because I don't want my kids to hear that, because my kids do really well in school, and so like they try really hard and they do well. And I didn't try very hard and I passed because I cheated, right? But I had to get through it. I had to survive, right? And so that was ultimately what I needed to do. Like I wasn't going to make it otherwise. And so I knew in my head, it was just like, man, you got to get this diploma, and you got by any means necessary. But now going through school and having attempted to try, right, and not doing very well, getting out there in the real world and making my way, I realized, man, they didn't teach you the things in school that you needed to learn in order to make your way in the world. Like I had to, trial and error and stumble my way all the way through. And then up at 40 years old, when you're finally cluing in on what it is that you need to do, it's a little late, right? I mean, at 40 years old, when you're like, oh, right? It was like, okay, now what? You got like, 20 good years left in you? Shit. Like, I wish I had figured this stuff out when I was 18. I would be done right now. I would be able to, like, actually have a decent outcome ahead of me instead of working my ass off trying to figure it out. But again, like, I'm not trying to blame the school systems as much as like blaming like society in general. This is the condition in which that most people are in. Like most people live that way. Look, like they just don't know, right? Once you start figuring it out, once you start realizing that, man, it's not as difficult to make it out there as people put themselves through. Like a lot of people don't realize that they put themselves in the condition of which that it's very hard. They think they have to work hard in order to make the money, which you do. You do have to work hard, but it's not necessarily working hard as much as it is being dedicated. Dedicated is the same as in my mind, being dedicated is working hard, right? Like some people might physically work hard every single day, beating their body up, roofing that house, putting those buildings together, doing the stuff, right? I mean, all the things, and they work very hard at that, right? And they break their bodies knowing that the outcome is a goal out there that they can achieve, right? And understanding that it's just like, okay, so this is how we make it. We have to work real hard. But then you think, okay, I can be the hard working dude who puts down more roofing, or I could think hard about what it is that I can do to try and be the guy who is bidding on the roofs, who is supplying the material, who is writing the checks, who's not maybe necessarily doing the physical labor, right? It's still working hard. You're figuring it out. That's it. That kind of mentality towards it. The idea that there is a condition in which that you can go and just get a 9 to 5 job and be super happy and successful with everything and have this wonderful retirement, that was back in like the 50s and 60s, okay? That doesn't exist anymore, and there's nothing that's going to be done that's going to bring that back. All right. Larry Bird, thank you for the $4.99. I bought those Constitution pamphlets because of you. We should print them out and put them on people's cars. Hey, Larry, thank you, man. I appreciate that. I had done something very similar. This is the last copy of about, I don't know, maybe 50 copies or something that I had purchased and was handing out. And this is like literally the last one I had. And it's something that I remember from what I was doing. And I was just telling people, hey, I understand that the whole thing is very complicated and difficult to go through. Just take this and memorize those things, right? The first 10 amendments to the Constitution. Just internalize those things, and I assure you, you will start looking at the world a lot differently. Right? You will look at your politicians a lot differently. You'll be looking at property rights and what your expectations of government. You'll be looking at things a whole lot differently, because once you have internalized your freedoms, right? These are not freedoms that were granted to you. These are freedoms that you had before government, right? These are the freedoms that you tell government that you have. That's right. Right? You tell government these are my freedoms. You can't inflict on these things. Right? We've given you permission. There's a bunch of things. You have a limitation. This is the permission that we have given you. Right? We the people have given you this permission. This is the confines in which that you're supposed to be in. These are our rights. We're telling you these are our rights. Right? And that you can't infringe on these things. That's illegal. You can't do that. We hold you accountable. Right? Understand that, right? Most people have no clue about any of that stuff. If you don't understand the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, if you don't know what they are, there's no way that you are going to be able to vote for somebody who is going to be protecting your rights, because you just don't know what they are. So it's impossible. If you cannot just sit there, like, I don't have this book open, right? Freedom of speech, the right to bear arms, the right not to have to quarter troops less during a time of war. The Fourth Amendment, the one that you should definitely know verbatim, right? Word for word. The rights of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects from unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall be issued unless upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation, particularly describing the places to be searched and the persons and things to be seized. All right? Fifth Amendment, due process. The sixth, rights of the accused in a criminal case. The seventh, the rights of the accused in a civil case. The Eighth Amendment is be free from cruel and unusual punishments and lengthy sentences. The Ninth Amendment is rights that are not specifically enumerated inside of the Constitution. Right? And the 10th, that you have rights, like the rights that are not specifically granted through the government are left up to the states and local people, right? Understanding these things, like understanding for what they are and how they really impact our lives. See, most people don't do that, and they don't even think about that. They're like, man, what is all this? Why is this important? Once you have internalized it, you understand it, then you know, like, you're like, oh man, I totally get it now. Like, after understanding Constitution and rights and stuff like that, like, I will not cross the street unless the sign says it's okay to go. Why? Because I don't want authority coming up and questioning me. And I don't want to have to tell them, no, I'm sorry, I'm keeping my mouth shut unless you can articulate a law that I have breaking, about to break, whatever. I'm not having a conversation with anybody. Period. All right? And the only way to do that is to make sure that you are conducting yourself in a way that doesn't have authority coming and questioning you. So part of that is not jaywalking. Right? You're a law-abiding citizen. People say, oh, I have a right to bear arms. Yeah, you certainly do. Right here, you have a right to bear arms. Right? There is no law by any city, any state, any municipality that says that you can't carry a gun. They can't do it. It's illegal. They cannot tell you that. You can carry a gun anywhere in this country, and I don't care what they say. Now, as for Astoria, City Ordinance 5.010 clearly dictates that the open carry of a loaded firearm is strictly forbidden. You cannot carry a loaded firearm. They can't tell you can't carry a firearm. That's illegal. It's against the Constitution. Any law directly violating the Constitution is void. But they can tell you you can't carry a loaded firearm, right? And therefore, if you are carrying a firearm and you are in city limits and it is open carried, then authority has the right to come and inspect that firearm to make sure that it's not loaded, that you're abiding within the ordinance. They cannot question, they can't identify you, right? They can't confiscate it. They can't do any of that stuff if you're not breaking the law. As soon as they identify that the gun is not loaded, you can be free to go, and you can carry as many firearms as you want. But you have to understand the law. And you have to understand that if the police officer comes up to me, I'm going to say, yeah, City Ordinance 5.010 clearly dictates that you don't have to identify yourself. You don't have to tell them what you're doing. You don't have to say any of that stuff. You don't have to communicate anything. and even questionable about whether or not they can even inspect the gun, but they can't confiscate it from you and they have to give it back. Yeah. Otherwise, it would be a violation of your constitutional rights. Rights are a joke. They're not. They are not a joke. All right. Ordinances are not laws. That's right. And there's case law that documents we are only liable to common law. That's right. And so if you can articulate that, if you know those laws, if you can spit out those case laws during the time of the infringement upon your rights, you will win every single time. And even if the cop does arrest you and all that, you will find that at the end of it, there is no judge who is going to prosecute you, or there's no like who are going to convict you if you are exercising your rights. Not in the history of time will that take place, right? Now you have to be able to articulate those things, and you have to be able to know what your rights are, and know how to communicate those at the right time. Right? Don't tase me, bro. Somehow the conversation circles back to politics. Not been to Alabama, have you? Your nation is one big batch of Dunning-Kruger types. I don't know. Welcome to the gray state, people. Exercise your rights means you have no power. Interesting. It's so amazing to me on how many people just fail to understand that. Like they just don't see it. Like I mean, the people who fail to believe that they have the rights or that the rights don't exist are the same people who believe that they were forced into a vaccination. Right? Like I didn't like people are like, you have to do this or you won't be able to. Or I'm like, okay, I'll be right over here believing that nonsense. Like there's no way. Get the hell out of here. Right? Like you can't force me to do anything. You can't force people in America to do anything. Anything. Nothing. Right? Now, the persuasion and all the other stuff that comes from it and people's fear believe that they are forced to do things, but you're not forced to do anything. Not a single thing. Right? And so I don't get it. Like when people are like, oh no, man, if you don't, they're going to do this. And it was just like, no, you've fallen for it. That's what's happened. You've fallen for you're a victim of this now, and you don't believe that the rights exist, and therefore they have control over you. Right? And when they come down with intimidation and you don't know what your rights are, you end up falling for their intimidation. Because you just don't see it any other way. You don't know how. All right? Not me. I don't like I'm not in fear of authority. Like I think of myself as the highest authority. I don't find authority any higher than I am. World Economic Forum gonna come down, you're gonna own nothing and be happy. I'm like, whatever. Right? Like I am not scared of those people. I am not scared of the New World Order. I am not scared of authority. I'm not scared of those people. It does like I'm just not. Like, other people can be in fear of that stuff. I've dove into enough conspiracy theories to know that it exists. And I understand that if you were going to come and try and inflict that kind of tyranny over me, you're going to have hell to pay. And I know a lot of other people are going to feel that same way when it starts to take place. I just don't feel it's going to happen. The fear of it is very controlling. It controls people immensely. And the idea that you are going to own nothing and eat bugs and be happy about it is just a laughable concept. Right? That's not real. That is not a real thing, right? Now, the reality of bug eating, that is, right? The reality of owning nothing is, right? The reality that you're probably happy from all the conveniences is. But the fear of it is fake, right? You may not own anything because you're probably not going to be a property owner because there's only going to be so many property owners and they're condensing themselves, separating themselves from the poor. That wedge is going to get deeper. Yeah, that's not the Economic Forum doing that. That's Cantillon effect. All right? Moving on. Man, we are loaded up on Super Chats. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for all the support for the Uneducated Economist. You guys are awesome. 650 people watching with 411 likes. Those 10 million simoleons are Harris friends. Okay. You can tell yourself whatever you want, but you're still under their control. I'm not. I'm not. Like, it's all about the meaning you give it. You make decisions based on the idea that you are under their control. I don't. All right. Now you can say, oh, dude, you're delusional. And okay, whatever. My beliefs and the meaning that I give it says that I am not being controlled by those people. Maybe yours is. Like the meaning and the decisions that you have done, you say, no, they control me and everything that I got going on in my life. And therefore, you make decisions based on that belief. I don't. Right? I don't believe that. And it's like, yeah, I mean, that's the difference between you and me. We give it different meanings. Welcome to capitalism, baby. Yeah, if capitalism existed, I would agree with you, but that doesn't exist. A capitalist exists, right? There are capitalist people, but capitalism means that you rise and fall on your own merits and you don't have things like too big to fail. As soon as you have too big to fail, you are a communist, period. You can't have both, right? So we are very much a socialistic, communistic nation with this belief that we actually have rights, that you do if you hold them accountable, right? If you are the highest authority. Otherwise, you're under their rule. I mean, there's no other way of looking at it. All right. Infamous NYC, $2. Thank you. The credible threat of you will own nothing. Yeah, but that's the thing. I already own nothing. Like, how is that a threat? Like, people are like, dude, you're not going to own anything. And I'm like, okay, well, that's like the same thing that I'm already existing in. So, like, you're threatening me with what I already got. Nothing. Like, that's okay. I mean, like, I'm not worried about it. Those people don't control my life. I have my own anticipations of what it is that I have for coming to my realities. And as far as owning something, like, what the hell do I want to own? I want a view, I want a steak, and I want music. Right? If you're going to take that from me, then okay, maybe I will be upset. But if outside of that, I am not worried. Right? I am my fear level is almost non-existent. And that's the way they control you, is with fear. If they're like, man, you're not going to have any more ribeyes, I might be a little scared. They're like, you can't listen to live music anymore. I mean, that might make me a little worried. No more view. You're not gonna have a nice ocean view ever again. That would scare me. That would make me worried. You'll own nothing. You'll eat bugs. You'll be happy. Like, what the frick is that? I hear with that. All right, moving on. So, yep, I don't own anything either. No friends, no family. What the WTF are they gonna do? Right? I mean, that's just the thing. Like, once, what? Just like Janice said, right? Freedom is just another word for nothing left to lose. It's so true. Like, they're gonna lose your ability to get a new Camaro. Okay, whatever. That's too bad. I so wished for the Camaro. Yeah. Communism is the lack of statehood in a pure scene. You can call it tribalism or anarchism. Anarchy is the lack of government. And I think that is probably more of a beneficial condition for us than any other form of government, is the lack of government. My strategy is to stay off the radar of authority figures. I might talk tough, but truthfully, I don't really do anything to warrant their attention besides trash talk on the net. And I assure you, Dissident 112, that is not going to do it. That's not going to get their attention in a profound way. What I'm doing here right now does. Right? This gets their attention because I have the attention of people. Right? Now, I personally lived a very long time where I tried to stay off of the radar. Right? I didn't carry a cell phone. I didn't use a debit card. I did all this other stuff. Somebody told me something very interesting about that. They said, when you do that, when you attempt to do that and you do not give them information, you go right to the top of the list. That you're trying to stay under the radar forces you to the top of the radar list. Okay? Ultimately, you got to give it to them. Give them the information that they are looking for. Okay? Not saying giving up your privacy. I use encrypted Telegram messages with my wife because I I believe that the communications with my wife is a personal thing that isn't for anybody else, not for advertisers, not for the government, not for anybody. It's it's between me and my wife, and that's it. So all my communications with her are encrypted, but everything else is out there because I don't want to be at the top of their list. So I just go ahead and give them the information. Here you go. And now a friend of mine, and I don't know if this is still a concept or something, but he says I give them even more information than they want. And he has a computer program that does just random searches of the internet of all kinds of different topics. So his Google feed is constantly being hit with all kinds of different news articles and different, all kinds of things that are being searched on the internet, all kinds of stuff. So ultimately, the algorithm has no idea who this guy is because of all the sheer amount of stuff that's being searched on his Google searches. Right? He's given him more information than what he needs, and hopefully he says that he can hide some of the real information that he's looking for within this bigger bulk of Google searches that are happening out there. Right? See, now this is like the type of strategy that you need to take, because trying to hide sends you right to the top of their list. They're like, we don't have any information on this guy. Let's dig it up. Yeah, let's go figure it out. And so the harder you try to hide, the more they try to research who you are. And it's all about advertising. Right? It's literally, it all comes down to, that's the major, like there's all the draconian things that could come from it too, the tyrannical things, but it's ultimately comes down to trying to sell you stuff. All right. Infamous NYC. This is not true. You own yourself, not a slave, Yui. No, I agree. Like, you own yourself. Like, I don't know, like, where did I must have said something that was mistaken there. All right. The owners have the most to lose. Thanks again, infamous NYC. Yeah, thank you. Rumor is they are going to bring the Camaro back again. Yeah, they're going to bring it back as an electric vehicle or something. All right, so people with assets have most to lose. This is Justin. Sure, Snugs. I haven't studied all. Yeah, if anybody has studied self-sovereignty, it's all-nighter. Yeah, I wouldn't be questioning him. That's a good one. Sounds to me like they've had interactions that maybe you don't understand. All right, let's cruise on down here to the bottom. Where are we at? All right. Whose record and who's controlling that record? People with authority and power don't care about rights. Oh, yes, they do. When you exert, if you know how to exert them, oh, they care. They care big time. And you go and research some of the people who have brought enforcing their rights in the court systems, holding the court systems accountable for their rights. You watch some of these judges start to back off when they start realizing that somebody can step up there and hold the courts accountable, right, in a profound way, saying, hey, I need you to show me the victim or the person who has been damaged from my traffic ticket. I'm not going to claim guilty. I need to see where the damaged party is so I can make them whole again because I got this parking ticket. You start questioning people on how it is that you can make them whole again, because if I can't make them whole from the damage, then where is it that this is a lawsuit? Like, why am I even here if there's no damaged party? And they're like, well, the damaged party is the state. Well, it's just like, well, the state's also judging me. So the state is the person who is accusing me of damaging them, and they're also the ones who are going to be judging me. Isn't this a conflict of interest? Yeah. I mean, you start understanding and holding them accountable in certain fashions, and you don't plead. Right? They're like, hey, if you don't plead, we're going to put a plea in for you. It's just like, well, are you practicing from the bench? I mean, you can't enter a plea unless you're like my lawyer, right? And therefore, if you're practicing from the bench, that would also make it illegal. You can't do that. You can't enter a plea for me. Yeah, there's all kinds of little rules out there, and I'm not trying to give advice or anything. I'm just saying, if you understand it for the level and the reality that it is, you get to hold them accountable. They don't. But if you don't know, you're going to be a victim. You're going to be a victim to their rules. And under anarchy, I can raid you and you have no legal recourse because no state. I think you're misunderstanding the level of anarchy that I am like referring to, right? If you have a system in which that you can now make them irrelevant, would that be like, here you have all this court systems and government and they are very relevant in your life. Now, that is the opposite of anarchy, is them being relevant in your life. If you can create a situation in which that they become irrelevant, where it doesn't, they don't make any difference in your life anymore, that's moving towards anarchy. Am I right? Like, I mean, that would just be kind of, I mean, simple to say, right? If you have more involvement from government, that is the opposite of anarchy. Anarchy would be less involvement from government. Well, if you have things like smart contracts, you can have a system set up in which that the contract is going to go through regardless of anything else. You don't have to take somebody to court saying, hey, they didn't fulfill their contract. The court system would be irrelevant. It wouldn't matter anymore. Smart contracts are going to fulfill the outcome. So now we can have a system in which that the court systems and governments in a major way are eliminated out of our life. That is very anarchy. Right? That's the type of shit that I'm talking about, is to literally get these peoples out of our lives in a profound way. Not saying that we have to have them 100%. These guys knew we had to have some rule, right? They knew. They said, here's a document that gives you just enough rules to keep the government at bay. Be careful with it. Right? So is like, I understand there needs to be some rule, but the amount that they are now inflicting upon us, the involvement that they have in our lives is too intrusive. It's too intrusive and it shouldn't be this way. And now, again, it's not up to me to decide whether it should or shouldn't be this way. I'm conducting myself in the reality that I see it. And I know that this document still exists. And so I'm going to do my best to conduct myself in that fashion. And if I can see that there's an ability to get government out of our lives and move back towards a less government rule, that's anarchy. That's moving towards anarchy. Yes, I'm in agreement with that. Let's find ways that we can have government completely out of our lives and still be civil. Smart contracts is a great start. That's the type of stuff that I'm talking about. People hear the anarchy and they think, oh, you just think that, people are going to come and rape your daughters, And I was like, oh, good Lord. It was just like, yeah, okay, government will stop it from happening. All right. Who helps the poor? Not the private sector, proven. Actually, no, that's not true. That is not true, man. Okay? The private sector is probably the most helpful when it comes to helping the poor. See, I watched government here in Oregon dump hundreds of millions of dollars into helping the homeless and watched it get worse. Okay? There's a gentleman out there. I should go and find a link to his channel. His name's Velly Ray. Velllyray. I think that's how it's done. Velly Ray. Go and check out his YouTube channel. You want to see somebody who is actually attempting to do something? That guy is doing it. All right? Velly Ray is probably one of the coolest people that I have recently seen on. He has no idea who I am. I've been watching his channel for the last few weeks. He goes around and he is actually doing stuff within the homeless community to try and make a difference. Offering up help to try and provide resources. Trying to bring whatever it is that he can do to try and alleviate the issues that are now happening within the Portland area. Born and raised there, he knows his community, he sees the problems, and he is doing something about that. Velly Ray is a cool guy. I mean, this guy is on it. All right? And if more people were behaving in that fashion, then you would actually see something being done about the poor and the homeless and the down community. Hundreds of millions of dollars from the rich people here in the Portland area and in Oregon were so sick of seeing all the ridiculous, disgusting homeless people out there that they threw hundreds of millions of dollars out there to make it get away from their view, Do you think they actually solved any kind of real problems? No. But they did get a lot of it out of their view. Yay, great job, guys. Wonderful, wonderful, help and contributions that you have done for this homeless community to do more for their mental health and drug addictions and, and breakdowns from their family societies and all that other stuff. Yeah, great job, guys. You did wonderful. Yeah. People like Veli Ray are actually helping. Guys like, Ozark at the lifeboat, filling empty bellies, right? I'm even wearing a shirt. These are the people who are actually doing something. All that government attempt to try and alleviate the problem makes it worse. It makes it far worse. It's frustrating as hell to see. And I know a lot of people will disagree with me on this topic, and hey, whatever, we all have our own opinions, but, how many of you, listen, you see this? Next time I see somebody sitting out in the rain, I'm like, I don't know what to do. I've gone out there, I've communicated with them, I've tried to serve the lunches, I've tried to say, hey man, what is it that you need to get off the streets and stuff like that. This condition is going to get worse, you know that, right? And that if more people don't start stepping up and doing something about it, you're going to see the absolute demand coming from the rich people out there to have government do something, and to throw hundreds of millions of dollars out there to just simply get it out of their view. They can't fix it. They can't fix this problem. Yui is very smart, but very naive when it comes to the authority and power. I am not. Everybody else is naive to this. That's the problem. Okay? You know how many people that I know who have gone up and... You want to see somebody? Here. Go on... I don't even know if he's still available out there on the internet. Go and check out Trent Goodbody. Right? Try to... this is the guy who came to our county, got arrested, and started enforcing some of his sovereign citizen rule upon our court systems, had them completely frustrated, had no idea what to do about him. Right? My buddies are, I have friends who, I won't even begin to tell you, right? I am far from naive on this concept, right? What I find is that people who don't believe this and believe in this are the naive ones, right? And that's what's sad about it. It's just like it doesn't exist. Much like the monetary policy of the Federal Reserve and how 99% of the people don't get it, 99% of the people don't get this, right? 99%. How many people have internalized the first 10 amendments to the Constitution and then tell me how naive I am about the powers of this nation? It's just like, I don't think so. Bravo Zulu, $10. The government is now doing the job of the church and the community once did for themselves. Yeah, and you think about it, there was a time in this nation in which that babies were born, healthcare was given, retirements were had. All this stuff existed before the government had as much power and influence as they do today. Right? And the reason is because of the situation that we are going through, right? The rise of the industriousness of the people and the rise of our standard of living, and that move into luxury, and the eventual falling from our manufacturing base and bringing in the foreign production and moving to that fiat currency has now left us in the condition we are in. Right? You are going to find incredible amounts of government influence upon the system, because if they weren't there, we would find it crumbling. So without more subsidies, without more tariffs, without more involvement, it would all begin to collapse again. And it's inevitable. It's a matter of time, right? So as far as like fixing it, I don't have any anticipation that we're going to be moving anywhere close to this. I don't believe that. Like, I don't believe that this is coming back, right? Not in a profound way. Could it? Sure. Right? Do I see where it could help? Sure. Smart contracts could be a way to eliminate a lot of government involvement in our lives. I see a lot of things that could happen. Do I anticipate that? Nope. Not at all. In fact, I see more of a deterioration and a further falling away from the concepts that were written in here. That's what I actually believe is going to happen. Because anything else is too painful. All right. Freedom comes from my understanding. I may die trying. Yeah. Keep hitting the like, please, everyone. Thank you, Brody. Civil was the eliminate tax? What if 49 million more Americans, elder, that worked all their lives and regular people go homeless in the next few years? They're homeless working 2 jobs even still. Yeah, that's right. That's what's going to end up happening. And it's just like people are going to realize that, you know, the days the days of long ago are like just just look at history. Anytime that you've ever had a separation between the rich and the poor and what that would look like. I mean, all these people who had to work their asses off all day long so that they could have like a little bit of food or something like that to survive. I mean, that's like the condition of most of human existence throughout history. Like the idea that you get to live this awesome life and, you know, and all these luxurious experience and a high standard of living, that isn't normal for human. There's 2 classes of people, the rich and the poor. That's it. And the poor are many and the rich are few. That's typical of history. Just go back and read the Bible or the Cantillon effect or anything else, right? It's just like, that's just the way it is. And understanding it and knowing why it occurs in that fashion then gives you the ability to position yourself so that you don't feel the effects of it like, you know, like everybody else will, who are believing that a 9-to-5 job and bosses should be paying more to find your way of life to be better. It's just like, no, it doesn't go down like that. Okay, cognitive dissonance on Reddit when Democrats are complaining about crime in their cities. I don't know. I mean, I mean, I don't know. Like, I mean, to me, when you throw that kind of blame around, then you're actually sitting in a position in which that you can then vote for somebody or have somebody come in who is going to make it better. And that is, to me, that's delusional thinking. Like, it won't work like that. You know? I mean, I think it's a great thought. You know, I mean, as far as, man, this would be really wonderful if it would occur like this, but it doesn't occur like that. Like, it simply just doesn't. And so when we see things like a high crime rate or anything else, it's just like we want to find blame. And it's easy to blame a politician, but it's definitely very difficult to blame economic forces creating the condition in which that we are now in. Because it's happened over time, and if you're not aware of the economic conditions and the forces that are happening, then you'll go like, no, they voted in, this is what happened, 1 + 1 = 2. How hard can that be, right? And so you miss out on what it is that's really happening from the underlying economic forces. Very much like money printer go burr, prices go up. How ignorant do you have to be to not understand that? Well, okay, that's great, but then nobody can explain to me how quantitative easing 1, 2, 3, and 4 failed to produce the inflationary scenario and how lumber returned back to its all-time low. All right, or not to its all-time low, but back to the recent low, a normal price. All right. See, again, it's very naive to think one way, that 1 + 1 = 2 when you see this. Democrats come into office, this happened, it's their fault, period. All right? Okay, man, go vote for the guy who's going to fix that. I'll see you later. I'm going to go off and live my life for real, you know? All right. This guy never stops. I really don't, man. I really don't. What time is it? It's 1 hour and 58 minutes into this. We're at 1 o'clock. The car is cooking. I'm sweating like mad in here. All right, population continues to increase. Yeah, but it's not increasing at a pace that is fast enough to keep up, right? In fact, it's one of the major problems that we were facing as far as a major downturn in the neutral interest rate is demographics. See, like again, John Williams brings this up for his monetary policy, right? Or as far as monetary policy for the low neutral interest rate world. It says three main global trends appear to account for the bulk of the decline in the neutral interest rate. One is demographics. Populations are aging as people are living longer and birth rates have fallen. This is a major problem for the new, like, how do you fix that? How do you fix the older population and a birth rate that is falling? Like, how do you fix that problem? It's going to be very difficult. Now, what I find very interesting is during the pandemic, I don't keep up on the stats, and I didn't follow any of the news articles. Pretty much if they were talking about COVID, I turn it off. But I heard a lot of people died, and I hear that it was a lot of elderly people who have died. Right? Again, like just an observer of the situation, in 2018, the demographics of an older population and a falling birth rate was a major issue for the decline in the neutral interest rate. And over the course of the last few years, there was a ton of people who were older population who had passed away. Again, like, I'm not trying to say 1 and 1 equals 2 in this one. I'm just saying the issues that they were facing back then, I don't know if those are necessarily the same issues today. I mean, it probably is still an issue, but could it be as major of an issue when we had so many deaths taking place over the last couple of years? I would imagine that the issue had been relieved some. Maybe not completely, but at least some. And again, done on purpose or not, I'm not trying to say that, right? I'm just saying this is what occurred. What else did he say in here? The second was productivity growth, which has slowed around the world. And the third is the heightened demand for safe and liquid assets, creating a wider wedge between the safe government securities like U.S. bonds and then the corporate debt. This is like, I don't know, to me, it's all very clear, but it's very difficult to wrap your head around it when you have so much misinformation that's being presented out there. Mainly the idea that the Federal Reserve is going for a 2% target. That right there has every single financial advisor, economist, and YouTuber out there, every single one of them completely wrong with all their information. That's all I can say. If they say 2% target and that the Federal Reserve is attempting to go for that, they are wrong. They are wrong. 100%. And that's like 99% of the majority of the people out there. I can't find anybody else who is so adamant about the average inflation rate over time and the neutral interest rate, and how that is the main objective of the Federal Reserve, is to keep an elevated inflation expectation and to raise the neutral interest rate. All right. Yes, but they will be able to find people trying to hide in the wilderness. Yeah, I wouldn't try and hide. Like, I don't try and hide at all. At all. In any way. Like, when I finally gave up my protest about, trying to hide and get out of the system and all that, I went full force right into it. Like, hey, let's fire up a YouTube channel. Let's communicate all my thoughts and everything else out there. I mean, if the FBI, the CIA, if Homeland Security, if anybody's watching me right now, thanks. I never felt so safe. Yeah. I want to live forever. If being rich here is a monetary thing, I'd rather live forever and work at an entity to gain riches. You think inflation would get rid of old money? Old money, get rid of it. I'm not sure that question there. Boss babes don't want kids till it's too late. Oh, yeah, no, there's the idea of having kids, like, I forget what the stats were, but it was something like by 2030, 50% of women between 35 and 50 will be childless and unmarried, right? And so you think about it, that's like more than, that's a lot, and the older you get, yeah, you can still have kids, but the chances of it start to fall off. Like, generally women want to have kids when they're younger, not older, right? And so by the time you're 35 or 50, that biological clock is ticking away, and most likely it's probably not going to happen unless you are actively moving in that direction. And so when you have them like such a movement of that condition happening, it doesn't go well for population growth. Like, it's just not going to happen. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I mean, mainly it has to do with hypergamy, right? Like, women don't want to get with a man that isn't going to perform better than they are. Like, women want men who are better than them. It's just all there is to it. And if a woman earns more money and earns like they don't really necessarily want to have kids. Like, it's an internal hard wiring. They want to have somebody who's going to be a provider and security and all that other stuff. It's just a natural instinctual thing. Like, we can try and say, oh no, we are, people who can think and behave differently. I don't care. Internal instinctual hard wiring is going to say something very different, right? And it's going to mean that a man is going to have to be a major provider in order to make sure that the security of that household and the income and the provisions and all that other stuff are going to be stable in there. And if a woman doesn't feel it, right, internally, then she is not going to be wanting to have kids. It's just the trigger for it, right? And so when you have a condition in which that one income makes it almost impossible to have a household, then men are not going to feel good about trying to start a family. And it's, believe it or not, women make decisions on having kids. It's men who make the decision on having a family. Right? If the man wants the family, he's the one who makes the decision on that. Right? And so if a man doesn't feel adequate, can't provide enough, then he's not going to feel good about trying to start a family. And he won't do it. And then again, we'll have a deterioration of society. Well, the whole world is losing population. The only place that seems to be above replacement rates are in Africa. Yeah, and there's a reason for that, right? Cantillon describes it right here. See, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. He said it right here. This is Cantillon's essay on economic theory, and it's chapter 15. Right? I think this is it part 1? Let me look here. I think it's part 1. Chapter 15, part 1, chapter 15. The increase and decrease of the number of people in a state chiefly depends on the taste and fashions and the ways of life of the property owners. Remember, it's always about the property owners. They're the ones who are dictating everything. All right. Says here, the increase of population can be carried furthest in countries where the people are content to live the most poorly. Let me read it again. The increase of population can be carried the furthest in countries where the people are content to live the most poorly and consume the least production of the soil. So yeah, places like Africa, India, whatever, like all these places where people are content to live the most poorly are going to find that's where the population grows the most. In countries where all the peasants and laborers are accustomed to eat meat, drink wine and beer, not many inhabitants will be supported. Kind of like the United States, right? See, we can go and reinvent the reasons why. You can say, oh, it's their fault and that fault and society and birth control and, chemicals in the water and all this other stuff. Cantillon described it. No, it's not that. It's an economic thing. Right? And I mean, all those other things are symptoms, and I'm not saying that they don't exist, and they're not reasons that could be included, but ultimately it comes down to an economic thing. Right? If you are poor, your condition of life will not be deteriorated by having kids. The only deterioration of life, if you are poor, would be death. So no worries, right? Have as many kids as you want. It won't deter your life any. But if you're rich and you have kids, your standard of living will most likely start to fall. Right? Not too many people can be supported in a rich nation where everybody is drinking beer and eating meat. Right? I mean, like, why try to complicate it? Why try to make it something that it isn't? Right? I mean, yeah, there is all kinds of issues that are taking place that can add to this issue, but it's an economics thing. All right? Everything is an economics event. Thank you, Leonis. Leonis? I'm sorry, I butcher names really bad, but thank you very much for joining the channel. Another member is going to be going through those member-only live streams, internalizing a lot of this information, finally, grasping what it is that the Federal Reserve is intending on doing. And the only way you can really do that is by going through these speeches. And we have done that in the member-only live streams that you can have access to for $1 a month. Literally $1 a month. You'll have access to all those member-only live streams, the future live streams that I do that are member-only, breaking down these speeches. You'll have the ability to ask questions and have discussions with the rest of the people who are also members. And we have some incredibly intelligent people. I have people who work for the Federal Reserve who are following me. All right. I mean, I had a conversation with them just the other day. There's hedge funds. There is the common everyday person. I got young kids, young grade school age students who are following the channel, trying to wrap their heads around monetary policy and economics. There is nobody outside of the realm of possibilities. I got the cross section of people. This channel is very unique for it. Like, I don't know anybody else who has built up a community quite like I have. And you have access to that through that member-only live stream or the member-onlys. It's $1 a month, $12 a year, $120 a decade. Cantillon never factored in plant-based fake meat. No, you're right. All right, go to the Philippines and see the kids eat out of the dumps. I mean, I'm not. I mean, does it not exist? What are you trying to think? Like, I don't know where that's coming from. So. All right, not only the lazy that can't create value. Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I I believe everybody has value in them that they can put out there to the world. Like, everybody has some sort of form of value that you can then provide to the universe, and the universe will reward you for that. And then it can be, and it could be so many things too. It could be your artistic value, like you can paint or play music, or maybe it's like, for me, it's just like coming out here on YouTube and talking economics. Like, this is my passion. This is what I love to do. This is what I have, like, this is what drives me every single day, is to research and come up with this and have the discussion and come out here on YouTube and attempt to try and provide other ways of getting information to you, maybe through, books or courses or something that I just seem to lag on. But this is like my dreams and stuff. Like, I can't think of anything else that would really like drive me like this does. And I believe that's for everybody, no matter what it is. Like, everybody has something in them that can do that. And if you are trying to be useful and contribute to the world won't help but to provide you with abundance from that. Especially if you're doing it without the idea of trying to make money. You're just trying to be helpful and useful and creative, and bringing value to the world, and it'll be just like a natural occurrence because of it. All right, speaking of meat, your neighbor down the street in John Day is selling 2 lambs. Kids eating out of dumpsters is better than telling your kids you can pick your endery. Schools can never teach real things or they would lose funding. True, all have universal value. Humans aren't living for nothing. Why are you here? That's right. The U.S. is the new Latin America. Thanks, Harris. Oh my gosh. Money is like energy. It doesn't go away. It just moves. I don't know. Money, I mean, there's a difference between money and currency. I think currency goes away because currency is debt, and debt is either issued or paid off, right? And disappears. So, like, currency does come and go. Money is silver and gold, and so therefore it can neither be created nor destroyed. It's just whether or not it's in possession or not. I love that attitude, and it's an inspiration. Most Americans' poverty is worse What? Excellent rant today, Mr. Yui. Well, I appreciate you guys. Thank you for hanging out. We got 474 people with 508 likes, $137 in super chats. My goodness, guys. You're always so supportive with those super chats, and I just appreciate you so much for being out here and contributing to that. All right. I think endery means your man or woman parts. Entropy is the second law of thermodynamics. It is the foundation of my worldview. What time is it? I'm going to have to call it quits here, guys. It's getting late. Oh, wow. This stream has been going for 2 hours. I didn't realize it. Yeah, I'm just kind of coming to that conclusion, too, and I'm just cooking here in my car. Hey, bud. Love your channel, man. Really appreciate your input on life. Yeah, you bet. Well, I'm just trying to be on. Hey, you want to say hi? I'm about ready to end. Yeah. You want to say anything? No? No. You guys cleaning up in there?
Yeah.
Yeah. You want to get out of here and go do something?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. We'll see what we can do, man. Good old Freddy. I love that boy. All right, I just want to own 1,000 acres. I don't need any other material things. All right, learn maritime law as well. Kids, yeah. Central America has lots of meat eaters and beer drinkers, but definitely isn't overly consumerist. Yeah. There's the boss man, yeah. Hey, Freddy. All right, Americans seem to think poverty is the worst sin. See you, UE. Thanks for the stream. Yep, Kevin, I agree. And with that, I think I'm going to bail out. We're going to go find something to do with the afternoon. Actually, I think I need to do some yard work before I do anything else. Good times. Really appreciate you all being here. Thank you for hanging out while we kind of do a little bit of review of Daly's speech. I think it's very important to understand, their view and what it is that they have as an idea for monetary policy. We internalize what it is that they are talking about and communicating about so that we can make the best decisions for ourselves. A lot of times when we look out there on the mainstream media, we are not finding that they are communicating in the same fashions that these people are through the central banks and their communications to the other central bankers. That's what we're trying to break down here. And again, thank you, Amos, for joining the channel. This is going to be the fastest, easiest way for you to internalize this information is to become a member of the channel and go back through some of the old member-only live streams that we have done where we have broken down these speeches word for word and then had a discussion about it. So even if you're not really into economics or you're just now getting into economics and learning and how the monetary policy works or how macroeconomics is involved, going through some of these member-only live streams that we have done, they're in the deep end of the pool. Like this is not easy. This is hard work, right? You have to, it takes, you have to be there. You have to be involved in it. But once you have gotten it, once you have internalized it, you will be watching and listening to the mainstream news articles, and you'll be pinpointing. You'll be like, "Nah, man, that's Cantillon effect. Nope, we got Gresham's law kicking in. Nope, Triffin's dilemma." You'll be seeing it. You'll be like credible threat theory. Nope, average inflation rate. You'll see the neutral interest rates. You will understand, you will see how the neutral interest rate is impacting the Fed's monetary policy decisions in a way that nobody else is really looking at. And again, can only be done by either going through and reading all those speeches like I had done, or joining in on the channel and some of the member-only live streams that we have done where we break this information down in a way that nobody else really has, or at least I can't find anybody else who's done it in this fashion. So thank you for being here. Thank you for joining the channel. Thank you for those who have been gifting memberships. Thank you so much. That is going to grow this channel exponentially with the memberships and get this channel up to a level in which that I feel will begin to grow exponentially to the information that is needed to get out there. People will see this. They will recognize it. They will be like, holy moly, this is very unique and so different from anything else that people are seeing out there. They need to get their friends, their family involved in this. And it's hard, right? You can't force this knowledge upon people. But a lot of times when they just start joining in on the discussion, they'll get something that starts to intrigue them, and they'll be like wanting to dive deeper into the knowledge and figuring it all out. And then they'll realize, man, they got information that nobody else has, and it benefits them, right? It helps us out. Gives us the ability to make those good decisions for ourselves and what it is that we got going on, because nobody else knows, just us. We're the only ones, right? Nobody out there knows the life that you need, the goals that you have, the condition that you're in. Nobody knows but you, and you're the only one who's going to be able to make those decisions for yourself. And this is how we do it, is by breaking this stuff down. All right, go check out Velly Ray, VELLYEY, something like that. Velly Ray in Portland, doing some incredibly profound, in my opinion, some incredibly profound, deep community service on his own. Like, just taking the initiative for himself and going out there and doing something about it. And I feel if more people were to take that kind of initiative, we would have a much different world. All right. I'll go get a link for it, and I'll leave it down in the description, maybe even pin it in the comments section. All right, Uneducated Economist, you guys let me know.